Right, it's Derek here, and I'm out in the workshop. Well, I'm outside. I've made this wheel lock, like a medieval wheel lock. It's something I've always been fascinated about. Ever since I went to the Tower of London and went into the armouries. My father took me when I was little. And I've always been fascinated on how difficult it was to make something like this, especially in the 15 and 1600s. They had no machine tools, and I just wanted to have a look to see if I could make something myself, how difficult it was. The answer is it's very difficult, and how they did this with the stuff that they had is just unbelievable. So I'm going to try and attempt to assemble this lock until the battery runs out. So I'll have a go at it, and then later on I'll assemble it into the stock. Well, let's see how we go on with this first of all. This is that's a tool for winding it up, and I've made a screwdriver on the end of it. Now, in theory I should be able to assemble all this with that tool, but for ease of doing it today I'm going to use a screwdriver. This is the main body of it, the main body of the lock. It's just a piece of metal I had under the bench, nice piece of metal, and another piece of scrap welded onto it, just give it a bit of length. So first of all, I think we'll put in the rocker. There's a little pin that goes in there. Hold that in with a little pin. Somewhere in here there's another one of them. This piece is what they call the sear, or the latching mechanism. This is the trigger part of it. So there's a little pin goes in there. That. The rest of the split pin. I mean, obviously they didn't use split pins back in the time, but I don't know how they did it, because I've never actually had a wheel lock in my hand. I've only seen films and photographs of them. But the way this thing works is, this is called a sear rocker, and there's a pin there that it'll become clearer later on. This fits in the wheel, stops the wheel rotating, and that's the trigger mechanism. And what happens is, when that's pulled back, it allows that to drop out and that pin to retract. And that's the crux of the mechanism. So in there's a little V-spring that fits into there. It's got to fit on the bottom of that sear, and underneath the sear rocker. It's a bit tricky, like that. So it's sprung loaded, so when you pull that back, that springs down. Should do. That springs down. When you let it go, it flicks back up. Slipped off. It doesn't slip off when it's all loose, but it's all in my hand. It's all a bit tricky to assemble this, and I'll be lucky if I can do this before the battery runs flat on the camera. Position like that. Right, so the next thing to put on is the pan, and all this mechanism here. This holds the mainspring. It's got to be quite robust because there's quite a few things that screw to this, and there's springs on it and all sorts of things, so it has to be quite substantial. Go on, Derek, shape yourself, lad. Just talk amongst yourselves while I'm doing this. The idea was, I haven't got many machine tools. I've got a little antique lathe. I've got obviously drills and stuff like angle grinder and what have you, Dremel. I just wanted to see how difficult it was to make something like this, because all they had back in the day was a fire and a hammer, and how they did this, I'll never know how they made these things. So that's the sear rocker, that's the sear spring, and the sear trigger. That's all in position. That's the pan. Okay, right. I think the next thing we'll put in is the wheel, and they call it a crankshaft. And I don't like calling it a crankshaft, but that's how everybody else calls it. This is the mechanism that creates a spark. This rotates against the flint and creates a spark and ignites the powder in the pan. Now there's a little hole there, and that hole goes where that pin goes on the sear rocker. So that's got to go into that position. So you've got to time, it's got to be timed this. So what I've done is, where that hole is there, you put that into that position, like that. So it's at the top. And you've got to get this in the right position. It's got to be timed basically. So you've got to get this, has to go in the right position. So I put a little mark on there, so it lines up with that hole. So I know when that's in there, it's in the right position. So that goes in there like that. So I've got it timed right. And now there's a little end bearing that supports this wheel. A little shim that goes on there as well. Just take a little bit of play up. Put it the right way around, Derek. I'd be better off if you put it the right way around, I think. So that goes on there, but the little shim goes on first, and that goes on there, and that's a little bearing that's holding the back of the crankshaft. Then when that's in, that's got to be free to rotate. It's got to be fairly free. Now it's all a little bit, we've got that sear rocker that's pushing against it at the back on the spring tension, so it's not going to rotate without anything. And this, you see there, it's not, that's okay like that. But you needs to be quite loose. Any friction on this and it doesn't work. So we've got that in position. Now we will put in, I think, this little mechanism here. But that's already on. This I'll show you what that's for in a bit, but that's already screwed on just to save me a bit of time putting it on. But that fits in there like that. Let's have a look now. I'm getting a bit lost. Just talk amongst yourselves. What am I up to? Forgot where I'm up to now. That goes in there. No, that's not the other way around. That's why it's in the wrong way around. It's really confusing. I must have done this 100 times and it's still confusing. So I've got this, which is the dog spring for the I'll show you what the dog is after in a bit. So you got that goes in there, and that goes little washer there. Like that. This is just a little keeper plate, this washer here. Little keeper plate. And it goes. Quite in the right position, that. Just like that. Right, that's the dog spring. I'll show you what the dog is in a bit. Right, we've got these two. These are two little keeper plates that hold that rotor back, the wheel back. All the time, just have to keep making sure there's nothing jamming this lot up, because it jams. If it jams up, it just doesn't. Nothing works. If it's tight, it doesn't work. Everything's got to be nice and reasonably nice and free. So these are like keeper plates just to position this rotor. Now this bolt is quite long because it's a dual purpose bolt. It goes through the back and it does something else besides holding that in position. Just to make sure that this can turn. The sear spring's just jamming a little bit. Oh, something's stuck there now. It's okay. Right, so that's the wheel in position. The springs in position. That's just slipped out of that. This sear spring slipped out. I'll put it on back again afterward. This is the pan actuating mechanism, and that's the spring to stop it flopping about, and that's the pan cover. So that goes into there. Then that slips onto that bolt that I've just screwed through. The last one, that was a long bolt I've just screwed through. So that goes onto there like that. Then you have a little tiny bearing that goes in there. I don't know if you're seeing this or not with the camera. It's hard enough to see why I'm doing it. And then a little washer on top. And then a nut. I don't like using hexagon nuts because it's not, you can tell, I think I had hexagon nuts back in the day, but I might have modified sometime, put a split pin in on a sort of spring or something to do away with the hexagon nut, but for today that'll suffice. Just nip that up. That's got to be nice and free like that, and that spring, this little spring fits over the top like that, so it clicks into position. So that's in one position, that's the other position. So now we've got that in position, so we put it on the main spring. My part missing. I'll just put this main spring in first. Put that back on there. It's really tricky to put together. I don't know if they will like this in the time or not, because this is only my interpretation of a wheel lock. Like I said, I've never had one in my hand, so I've only seen photographs, so I'm working off what I think it was like. It's close. If it's not the same, it's very close. Oh, this is awkward. That goes down there. Now when that's in position, it stops that sear spring from fletting out the bottom, because once that's in position it can't come out, but if that's not in, it flits out for fun. And I've got a little keeper plate on there to hold it in. So what we need to do now is to release the crank. Take that Right, the only thing we haven't got is the dog spring. I seem to be missing it from somewhere. Just go see if I can find it. Right, it's this that was missing, not the spring. It's the dog that was missing. So the dog fits in there. Now this is tricky, this. I don't know if I can do this without putting it in the vise. I would normally put it in the vise because I've got it. No, I'll put it in the vise. I'll do it in the vise that. Had it in the vise. What you have to do is to pull that spring down while you screw it out, and I can't do it by in my hand, so I've got to put it in the vise and then make sure that's nice and tight, because that is quite a strong spring. Now these parts are out of the stock. That's the trigger, that's the pin for holding the barrel in, and this holds the mechanism in, and those 3 screws in, and that's a front hoop that holds the barrel to the stock. I'll fit those in a bit, and that's part of that as well. Right, let's see if it'll work now, this. So the idea is that you wind it up with the key until it latches like that. You close the pan, put the dog down, and to fire it, it's like that. That's the mechanism. So what's happening here now is there's a little piece missing off here. There should be another one of these on top, and I've lost it. I've made it and lost the damn thing. But there should be another one of those on top, and this holds a flint, and that flint rides on that wheel. When that wheel spins, it creates a spark. So what you do is you put priming powder in there, you then close the pan, you wind this up until it clicks into position, famous last words, like that, and then close the pan. And then you put the dog down, which would have the flint on, that would ride on top of this pan. When the pan opens, that jumps onto the wheel and the wheel spins. It's all got to be done in time, so it's got to work like that. So that jumps onto the wheel, there's gunpowder in there, there's a spark created, ignites the gunpowder, it goes through this little channel into the barrel, and that fires your main projectile. So you put gunpowder in, you've got to put your priming powder in there, you've closed it off so it doesn't get wet or doesn't fall out. You've got a flint on here which rides on top of that pan. It's already wound up, so it's now ready to go. All you've got to do is to pull the trigger. To pull the trigger mechanism comes up here to this trigger mechanism, this sear, it's called a sear. And then all this spring unwinds, that's the main spring. It's all drifting off that crankshaft, so the way it works is like that. So the pan is opened automatically by that cam. That cam comes round, and the first quarter of a turn, the first movement of this little cam down there opens, pulls that back, exposes the wheel, and at that time the flint jumps down onto the wheel. So it's got, if you've got 3/4 of a turn of the wheel, you've got 1/4 of the turn is just that, and then the next half a turn is the wheel rotating against the flint to give you the spark. So that, you close the pan and that opens automatically when you pull the trigger. Like that. Okay, so that's the operating mechanism assembled. The stock's drying off in the shed. I'll see if it's dry enough to assemble into the stock, and I'll carry on doing that. If it's dry enough I'll do that, if not I'll have to do another day. Right, let's give it a go. This is the burst stock. Now the only thing that's in this stock is the little trigger spring in there, which is just held up to the top here by that screw. I don't want to take that out because it's a good fit. I don't want to take it out because it's tricky to get back in nice and tight. So I don't want to take that out. That's just a wooden stock. So first thing to go into here is the trigger. So is that camera pointing in the right direction? Let's have a look. That's a bit better. Now, I've found that the easiest way to assemble this is to wind it up first, as you can't get it in. So you wind it up and latch it. And once it's in position, you can release it and then it sits in better. But you have to wind it up first before you fit it. That fits in there. Hole in there, not drilled a hole in there. Talk amongst yourself. Yeah, I've forgotten to drill a hole in there. I put a little plate at the back of this the other day and I forgot to drill a hole back in it again. It's just an adjustment I did to it. And all the time when you're doing it you have to make sure it's not jamming up, because it jams for fun. So And there you have it. The whole thing is assembled. And you should be able to do it using one screwdriver. There you go.